Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Costin here with a discussion about the Old World custom campaign mod for Total War Warhammer 3 by ChaosRobie, which significantly expands the campaign map compared to where it is in Immortal Empires. How much of an expansion? Well, over here, this right here, all of this that you're seeing here is just the Galleon's graveyard. If I scroll out, zoom out even further, you can see that this map is of biblical proportions. It is probably the biggest map in Total War history. In the corners you have Realms of Chaos, so Siege, Slaanesh, Khorne, etc. The terrain is not loading because, well, it's there, it's just not loading because of Toggle Fog of War. I imagine if I were using a console command or some other method, it will load properly. Same thing, by the way, happens with the Galleon Graveyard. That's why I picked Sigvolt for this particular video, just to show the Galleon's Graveyard. Looking pretty good. Lots of regions, lots of factions, lots of possibilities over here. You have a huge area of the campaign map over here with tons of factions and settlements. So some settlements, some portions of the campaign map will have settlements fairly close to each other. Other portions of the campaign map will have settlements pretty spread apart. But regardless of that, this is a gigantic map. In fact, it's so gigantic that this is kind of the limit of what the engine can support. Understand, this is pushing the very engine to its limit in more ways than one. In fact, it's pushing the engine to the limit so much that chaos corruption, or corruption in general, I think is no longer used here because it would tank the performance so much. And even on a high-end computer like mine, I just recently upgraded my CPU, RAM, and all that because end turn timers, and, well, I was just being bottlenecked significantly by the CPU, especially in Warhammer 3. But this map, geez, is big. Maybe a bit too big in some ways. Though it has to be pointed out that there have been people, and I got a feel for ChaosRobie to a significant extent on this, but there have been people who are like, oh, include the entire world. Yeah, that is not doable. There are limitations on how much the engine can handle, but it is worth pointing out that this map works. And in fact, the initial versions of the Old World, which didn't include the Dark Lands, didn't include Camarine, Hekara, Araby, which it now does, those actually ran better than Immortal Empires. It comes down to the visual detail on the map, things like chaos corruption, so there's a lot of less visual details in the terrain. There are sacrifices that have to be made to achieve a map of this particular size. And even then, I gotta tell you, things are gonna be fairly interesting in terms of like how this does handle. Now, there's quite a few things I do like. Not just the sheer scale of the map, not just the sheer size of it. Like, size may not necessarily mean much in a campaign. But you see, here's the things that I do like about this map. And maybe some of the things I do dislike, because yes, there's always criticism. You can level at pretty much anything. Though in this case, it can feel a bit like nitpicking, I'm not gonna lie. But here's the thing about this map that I do like. Because it's so spread apart, because it's so massive, you end up having various areas of the campaign, be it Britannia, for instance, or the Empire, feeling significant. And you can genuinely spend an entire campaign in just those areas. Like, let's say you're playing Karl France, you can end up spending virtually your entire campaign in that area, but you have the build-up for a long campaign. And quite crucially, because the map is so massive, the legendary lords are spread apart. And the benefit of that is that it allows these kind of AI factions to build strength. I probably recommend using some AI mods, maybe SFO and all that, to push that further. Maybe some other mods. I have a huge list of mods myself over here to give the AI some benefits to build up strength. So you can end up with some very significant AI empires over here, because you gotta understand, in terms of like research, in terms of units, in terms of builds, the game isn't really designed for the short, aggressive campaigns we do play in Immortal Empires. It's more so designed, like research units economy. It's more so designed for like longer campaigns. That we don't play long campaigns in Immortal Empire as well. Just speaks about some of the issues here, there. So that is great. It adds to a more dynamic campaign as opposed to just, playing, say, a campaign as Karl Franz and just rushing, Kazrak and Festus or conquering Bretonnia dealing Gram. You will have those kind of issues in the long term. Like, you even have Tarax over here in this particular map, so enjoy dealing with that one. At the same time, however, because the rush is not happening there, because the rush of Legendary Lord is not happening there to, say, the same extent, you end up in a situation where you actually end up having significant AI empires. Again, some mods on this subject would be recommended in order to create a better experience and really help the AI. Because the AI does have some severe limitations in the vanilla of the game. Now, you're going to have some performance issues. It depends on mods you're using. But all the same, like, it leads to a better situation. On top of that, one of the problems in Immortal Empires is the constant aspect of settlement hopping. So you don't really fight that many field battles, which are the most interesting battles in the game. Sieges don't work, minor settlements not that interesting. You have settlements spread apart enough over here that you will encounter far more field battles. Just naturally speaking, not just with mods or not. Though keep in mind, this campaign map is probably designed around the usage of quite a few mods, pointing that out. So that is a better dynamic. In some cases, ignore that for a moment. SFO. Maybe in some cases things are a bit too spread apart, but for the most part it does lend itself to a better dynamic. My recommendation would be just get mods that disable settlement battles completely, so every battle you fight is a field battle. And that can lend itself to an even better experience than you have even here by default. So there's some really good things happening with this map that I do greatly appreciate, just from an inherent gameplay standpoint. But there's more. Oh boy, there is obviously more, right, to it. Like, a map this size really can push a player to enjoy a longer campaign, can really lead to some more interesting experiences. You're probably not going to be playing Pokemon, collect all the legendary lords, but just look at Zarnagrund, right? You think of Zarnagrund in the lore, right? You think of this massive Chaos Dwarf city. It is powerful, don't get me wrong, in Immortal Empires, but the whole of this is Zarnagrund. That is biblical proportion. Apparently they have a rebellion issue because these factions have apparently rebelled against them. That's, by the way, Zaytan's campaign. Zaytan is there to restore order for Gorf the Cruel. You have the Black Fortress over here in the south in Draziv's campaign. You have the War of Karak 8 Peaks in the Badlands in quite a lot of ways actually realized, because you look at this is Karak 8 Peaks. It is a great dynamic, so you're having to fight Queek and Skarsnik from the very beginning, and having to manage that effectively if you're playing, say, a Belagar campaign. When Forgrims talks about restoring the realm, well, this is the realm. It is pretty massive. Not quite sure how it would work with, the Confederation and Legendary Grudges of the Dwarves, but certainly this is a map designed for longer campaigns. And I do love it. Like, this has been really great from the beginning. I do think you probably want to use mods, quite a lot of mods, in order to make it work. Like, I personally, what I'd recommend people use is use the mod configuration tool, so MCT. You need mixers as well, by the way, for this. And then one of the things that you want to do is get the Ultimate Campaign Configuration mod as well. Whether or not you're using SFO, that's a different discussion, but you want to get this. Maybe even, increase it further, though I think you need to start a new campaign, so just don't do that. Like, you can have, and I would recommend using this because you kind of want to be in a situation where the various factions do build up earlier, because that's one of the problems with if you're playing pure vanilla with this. Because of the slower growth and all that, it will take a long while, for factions to end up with higher end units. But if you give significant benefits to yourself and AI, then you can end up with some really interesting scenarios over here in a campaign, in terms of like high-end armies, in terms of powerful factions. It can be really, really good from that particular perspective. I would probably recommend like lowering the upkeep cost for the AI, like by minus 30%. Maybe, and though not lowering things like or increasing things over here, just lower the upkeep cost by like say 40%. Depends on the difficulty you're playing on, so that AI can recruit more army, is recruiting more armies, maybe even to give yourself some of that, and end up in a campaign situation where there's a lot more armies, a lot more fights. See, this is the thing. One of the problems in Immortal Empires is that you usually end up in this kind of situation where you only have a handful of armies. Like, and if you have a lot of armies, you're spread all over the world, right? Far and wide, to the point that, you know, you're playing Karl Franz campaign, you're not really playing an Empire campaign. You're conquering Camry, etc. So by the point you get to the stage of having a lot of armies where things could be interesting, dynamic, you no longer fighting an Empire. With these kind of settings, you will have a lot of armies. But the great thing about it is because of the sheer size of the map, that those armies will be hard-pressed to defend all your boroughs. So you have a campaign where every faction has a ton of armies, dozens, and yet you're not encountering the same kind of problem that happens in the base game, where more than 2 armies in one particular point is really crowded. Here you might have more than 2 armies in one particular point, sure, but more often than not you'll have them spread apart on the campaign map. But you'll have multiple armies, you'll have a lot of fights, you'll have to play the campaign differently as opposed to just using one army to win. Just some ideas on that particular level. Also, it can help to use SFO, and specifically with SFO, one of the things that can help you is increasing army movement speed. Like, I'd probably use a combination of SFO or Radius with the mod campaign configuration tool, all that. How you feel about that, which settings you want to use, that's, you know, personal preference, but that's what I'd recommend, because no one likes the intern timer simulator, right? I mean, I understand the idea of wanting a slower campaign, but the intern timer simulator is not great. But this brings me to perhaps one of the bigger issues that does exist in this map, and yes, the intern times on this map. It's such a massive map with so many factions that the intern times themselves end up being a bit too much. Like, there's 400 factions, or over 400 factions, 443 right now, on this map. That can take a while. And keep in mind, this is do not have a computer like this. Let me just be clear on this. It's like, mind you, the computer itself is not the most expensive damn thing. The monitors, microphone, etc. That's a different discussion. But still, this can take a while, right? And one of the things that I would personally like to see as an option would be just being able to segment the map and just play the map in certain areas. Like, let's say I'm playing an Empire campaign. Do I care about the Badlands, Darklands, Chaos Wastes in the north, Realms of Chaos, Galleon's Graveyard? Not really that much. So if I could disable those areas, as much as I love having a big map, if I could disable those areas, that would be great. Now, the mods that should do this, though the way they do it, I think, isn't perfect, and even if they worked, and they're not right now, I think they need an update, like, so it's gonna take just a bit for those other mods to be updated, if they haven't already, if there's not already a fix. I don't know, I didn't find one before recording this video. Could be out there, but what we really could use with respect to all of this is, like, you know, kill distant minor factions. I would personally kill all factions, right? Like, over 70% of these factions, just reduce it to 100, dependent on the area you're starting in. That is something I would like to see. So just like, if you're playing a Karl Franz campaign, what would you really want? Well, you'd probably want this entire area, so the entire Empire, Kislev, Norska, fair enough, right? So Bretonnia, Norska, etc. Forget Albion, forget, you know, everything beyond that, southeast, very deep south. You wouldn't need that. So I think it would be great, better, from my perspective at the very least, if, you know, we had multiple maps, so like smaller ones. Like if we want to play campaign as Gas Dwarves, we can have a map focused on the Darklands, Dwarves, Badlands maybe, right? If we're playing an Empire campaign, though that should be a choice, right? There are mods, but just killing minor factions is not necessarily the most elegant solution, so even if it worked, it wouldn't be perfect. It's not necessarily quite as horrible. Tolerances will vary on that, but I think, like, I think there's a bit too many people that really just think, oh, we want the whole freaking world like this. It's like, that, like, if you want 1,000 freaking factions, and I'm putting that mildly, if you want 1,000 factions in an Enter timer where it has to go for 1,000 faction, fair enough. For my part, I would like a map with the kind of distance of settlements like this. I would like a map that has the kind of scale of the Empire that we're seeing here. Absolutely, that's great. That's fantastic. 10 out of 10. But I would also like a map that doesn't have areas activated that are not relevant for a particular campaign. Like, you know, if I'm playing a Zarnagroon campaign, like, yeah, sure, I want the Darklands, I want this in basically this entire area, but beyond that, not really, not all that much. Maybe add the Dwarves just for final vengeance, but kind of the point. I think that would be great. Maybe something Creative Assembly you should consider, because this is the problem as well with, like, not just like with this mod, right? It's more so an issue of Immortal Empires in the way Creative Assembly has. I think, like, smaller, more focused maps, so smaller, or forget smaller, forget smaller, no. More focused maps on certain areas with distinct campaigns, that would work better than just having a map that covers the entire world. We can have that, but there's always going to be trade-offs for something like that, right? There are trade-offs, plenty of trade-offs here. But a final point I'll make on this, I think a map like this just showcases what Total War can do, even with the current engine. And imagine what CA could do with a more modern engine that can go even further. Because if you think that, oh, we can't get better performance or a larger scale, we absolutely can. We live in a world where Ultimate Battle Simulator 2 exists, right? We live in a world where there's, you know, things like No Man's Sky. The idea that we can't have even much bigger scale with better performance, much better performance, is, I'm sorry, like, and great graphics, yeah, that can happen. Technology has evolved like that. And I think, like, what this map shows is what you can do at the moment, but imagine the future of what is possible. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned.